Raghuramaraju, Professor of Philosophy at the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences at IIT Tirupati. He will be talking to us on the topic Doing Philosophy in Contemporary India. Before we begin, please note that the event, along with the contents in the chat box, is being recorded. I also request everyone to keep your microphones on mute throughout the lecture, which will go on for 60 minutes, and then there will be a Q&A session after that. Without further ado, I now request Ms. Rajvi to give the welcome address. Over to you, Rajvi.
Thank you, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yeah,
Yes.
you are.
Thank you. Good afternoon, one and all. On behalf of the research scholars of the School of Sanskrit, Philosophy and Indic Studies, it is my honor to welcome Professor A. Raghuramaraju, a distinguished philosopher and scholar, as our guest speaker today. Professor Raghuramaraju is currently a faculty teaching philosophy at the Indian Institute of Technology, Tirupati. He holds a PhD in philosophy from IIT Kanpur and has taught at Goa University and the University of Hyderabad. Professor has published numerous books with renowned publishers, including Oxford University Press and Routledge. His notable works include Debates in Indian Philosophy, Classical, Colonial, and Contemporary, Enduring Colonialism, Presences, and Modern Absences in Indian Philosophy, Debating Gandhi, a Reader, Desire and Liberation, biography of a text by Videra Chandidas, Modern Frames and Pre-Modern Themes in Indian Philosophy, Border, Self and Other, Calibrating Western Philosophy for India, Rousseau, Derrida, Deleuze, Guattari and Videra Chandidas. He has also edited a volume titled Seven Sages, Selected Essays of Ramchandra Gandhi, published by Penguin. In addition to his academic accomplishments, Professor Raghuramaraju has engaged the broader public through his monthly column for the English Daily in the Telegraph, Kolkata from 2019 to 2024. Today, we are privileged to have Professor Raghuramaraju share his insights and expertise with us. We are also pleased to welcome Professor Koshi Tharakan, the Dean of the School of Sanskrit, Philosophy and Indic Studies at Goa University. Furthermore, we extend warm greetings to our esteemed faculty members, research scholars and students, as well as other participants from and outside Goa University. Welcome once again and thank you for joining us today. Over to you, ma'am and sir.
Thank you, Rajvi, for the warm welcome. Sir, now you may start.
Yes. Thank you, Bara and Rajvi, for that generous introduction. I thank Professor Koshi Tarakan and faculty of the Department of Philosophy and Dean and other faculty for this kind invitation. As you all know, or maybe some of you do not know, that my my first job was at Goa University. I taught there for 6 years, and that even today I consider as one of my best periods. It's a period that gave me an opportunity to try with new ideas and experiment, and that was a very interesting period. Goa University has just started from a PG center to university, and then there are a lot of fond. I have very fond memories, and the two books that Rajvi has read out are actually conceived and almost written while at Goa University. Debates in Indian Philosophy, and then Debating Gandhi. In fact, Debating Gandhi was a course that I taught at Goa University, and when I mentioned this to Professor Ashish Nandi, this is the course that I'm teaching. He immediately said, "Give it to Oxford University Press," and then that has become a book. So you know how much I'm indebted to Goa University, and fondly remember all the senior colleagues, including Professor A.V. Afonso was instrumental, was one of the people who was in the selection board who selected me. So with that, let me begin. Let me clarify that doing philosophy today is a very, very complex and challenging, but very rewarding. It is complex, it is challenging, and very, very rewarding. Extremely rewarding, that I find it extremely rewarding. But what are the challenges? And why is it complex? Let me point out at the outset that if one is doing philosophy in modern India, then the way in which philosophy was done when I was a student at the University of Hyderabad, I found that most of my teachers were doing very, high level Western philosophy, especially analytical philosophy, philosophy of language, and philosophy of science. And they were top, researchers. And my teachers used to publish in journals like Mind, Philosophy and Phenomenological Research, and the Royal Society, Cambridge University Press published a journal called Philosophy. So they are really, on the frontiers of research, and that was something that amazed me. So it set a lot of targets and very, very high targets, but that frame kept haunting me. So I thought that it is necessary. So I was trained in analytical philosophy, in philosophy of language, and philosophy of science. And then I thought that I will pursue my career in that kind of a thing. Then I quickly realized something very, very astonishing when I was in my second year, when I found like people who were doing frontline Western philosophy, like Professor Ramchandra Gandhi, Professor Suresh Chandra, then Professor K. Dayakrishna, Professor K. J. Shah used to visit Hyderabad University frequently. I found them turning away from Western philosophy, even though they were very successful in, in publishing in those places. So I found something very symbolic in their return. Towards where they were returning, it was not very clear to me. But they were not as enthusiastic as earlier in doing Western philosophy. So I thought that is it just lethargy, or is it just complacency, or is it a sign of old age? This is something that it came to me. But then later I found out that that's not the thing. There is a larger symbol that was reverberating in that return, but where to return, as I said, was not very clear to me. Okay, so there are series of seminars conducted in the University of Hyderabad, and then discussions and all that thing. So I found that one thing which reverberated in their talk was that they were trying to do classical Indian philosophy, and they were not very good at it. So this is what made me, when I got into IIT Kanpur, I deferred my pursuit of Western philosophy, and then I wanted to reflect on this thing. When I reflected on this, I found that during that time, there are two kinds of doing philosophy. Two kinds of doing philosophy. One kind of doing philosophy was doing Western philosophy. There are other kinds of doing philosophy, which was doing Indian philosophy the traditional way. But what I found in these people, my teachers, is a third category. And the third category was that doing Western philosophy and returning to Indian philosophy. And then I found that that is not something that I want to emulate from them, but I wanted to draw a lesson from them. I didn't want to emulate them, but I find that there is something, a good lesson that one could, you know, find in them. It is in this context I turn towards what kind of work is going on along these areas. And then I realized that this is something that I want to set it at the outset, that if one wants to do philosophy in India, you need to have three requisites in front of you. One, you have to be well trained and should have the rigor of modern Western philosophy. Two, you should have knowledge about classical Indian philosophy of all branches. Three, you should know what is the context of the modern, so that you have the ability to compare, contrast, and calibrate. I repeat again, compare, contrast, and calibrate these schools of thought. So this is what I found. I told myself that you have to be very, you cannot just say that I will abandon Indian philosophy, Western philosophy. No, I think it is necessary to retain that training, which is enormously useful, very useful to do philosophy in India. At the same time, not pursuing the philosophy that is done in the West. So it is in this context I thought that I needed Western frames and Indian themes. In fact, that's one of the titles of my book, which is Modern Frames and Pre-Modern Themes. Okay, that's the first point that I wanted to make. So then why did I then what did I do? So what I did was I did my doctoral work, where I really did proper political philosophy, looked at various political philosophical theories in the West and things like that, and then I joined Goa University. That university has provided me ample opportunities, like a nursery for me, ample opportunities to try. You could defend the most indefensible idea, in the canteen sitting with colleagues and students. You don't have to belong to any ideology, however big and prominent that ideology is. You can sit with Marxists and criticize Marxism. You can sit with liberals and criticize liberals. So that is a very wonderful ambience, wonderful colleagues, and very lovable people. And then that is a place where I tried new ideas. One of the ideas that I tried at that time was simply, it was like this, was this one. Should I continue doing Western philosophy, or should I continue doing Indian philosophy? The immediate answers was no. I neither wanted to continue Western philosophy nor turn towards Indian philosophy like my teachers did. I explored something, during that time. I reflected, I struggled hard, and then I found that there is a very interesting question that I asked. The question that I asked was, what is the formula behind Western success of modern Western philosophy? What is something which modern Western philosophers are doing? There are two things. One, they are doing what they are doing, but what they are doing is predicated on a particular formula. And that formula interested me. And what is that formula? The formula that I find in reading Western philosophy was that they were referring to their immediate Purva Paksha. That is something which, which played a very important role in my career, which is that if you are doing, if you look at a Western philosopher will always be criticizing somebody who is his Purva Paksha opponent. So what is the requirement in dealing with your opponent? According to Akshapada, in a debate or in discussion, the qualification for you to debate with the other is you should know about the other more than the other knows about himself or herself. Okay, that is the qualification. And if you look at any paper published in any journal, philosophy journal in the West, you find this very, very pervasive. That the first paragraph of the article that is published will invariably have very clear knowledge about what is an idea that you are going to reject, you are going to oppose, you are going to contest. That is something which is a big hallmark of modern Western philosophical tradition. I also found it in classical Indian philosophy subsequently, but this is the first, impetus, first frame that made me to really look at, what is happening with the modern Western philosophy, and why is that modern Western philosophy is so attractive, so profound, and there's a lot of activity going on. Okay, that is what I found. What is there a Purva Paksha? What is their opponent? For instance, if you look at the works of not only modern Western philosophy but even otherwise, you find that Plato is the Purva Paksha for Aristotle. You cannot understand Aristotle unless you understand Plato, so that means if you wanted to understand Aristotle, you should understand not only Aristotle but also Plato and Aristotle's disagreements with Plato. That is also what is available in Rousseau's engagement with Grotius. Unless you understand Grotius, you will not understand Rousseau. And Rousseau spends considerable amount of time in disagreeing with Grotius. You know what is this argument? The argument is very simple. The argument is that if I am the owner, using modern individualism, if I am the owner of my body, why should I not sell my body to a master and become a slave? Okay, that's the Grotius argument. And now you cannot stop, Grotius from making this argument. And the reason why you cannot stop is the modernity, particularly the discourse of right, say that you are individual and you are owner of your own body. You can do whatever you want to do. In this context, Rousseau comes up with a beautiful refutation. And what is the refutation? The refutation is that yes, you can sell yourself. Okay? You can sell yourself and become a slave. Okay? But the problem is the contract, the transaction called selling presupposes that there is something that you get in return by selling something. That is, if I sell myself, my master gives something to me. My master gives something to me. Okay, if I become a slave, I'm not there to receive it. So he says that you can do everything with your life, but you cannot sell yourself. Why? Not because of a dogmatic thing saying that no, that is not allowed. That's being very pragmatic. But it gives a reason why you cannot do that. The reason why you cannot do it is because you have this problem of transactionability. So like that, you cannot understand John Locke without understanding David Palmer. Okay, that Filmer, sorry, Robert Filmer. So these are the various, Purva Pakshas that drove philosophy in the West. Similarly, you cannot understand, Shankara without understanding Nagarjuna, Dharmakeerti, or others. Okay, so I, given this thing, I asked myself, who is my Purva Paksha in India? If I am doing philosophy in the West, my Purva Paksha is the immediate predecessor. Suppose if I am doing philosophy in India, will my Purva Paksha change or not? People who have done Western philosophy seriously have not raised this question. And my teachers who turned away from Western philosophy also did not raise this question. I raised this question because I did not want to get into provincialism, because if you debunk Western philosophy, there is a danger that you are provincial. You are doing Indian philosophy. I didn't want that. I wanted to take the canons from the West, successful, since they are successful canons from the West, and want to emulate them. And then what is the canon that I found? I found that Western philosophers take their opponents seriously, their Purva Paksha seriously. So I asked myself, if John Locke was in India, would he, take Filmer as his opponent? The answer is no. Okay, answer is no. So that is the reason why I explored that possibility and found that who is my Purva Paksha. Now, shockingly to me, it was very nice. I felt nice to ask this question, but the answers to that were very, very depressing. Very, very depressing. And at one point of time, I thought, why did I ask this question? So I was ready to drop this question because there was no philosophers in India. There are no philosophers in India, or there are no immediate philosophers in India, except that you can claim, the classical philosophers in India, but that is not what Western philosophy was. Western philosophy was not only, sometimes they would revisit classical ideas, but the major focus is on modern, the modern Purva Pakshas. So it is in this context, when I started looking at it, I did not find anybody who is my Purva Paksha. Who is my Purva Paksha? I found that there is a lot of people doing Indian philosophy per se. There are a lot of people doing Western philosophy per se, and they did not ask this question. But I thought that it is a very good question to. Purva Paksha means an opponent. Who is my opponent? Like in the case of Rousseau, Grotius is an opponent. Okay. In the case of Shankara, Buddhists are opponents. In the case of Aristotle, the opponents or the opponent is Plato. Similarly, in the case of John Locke, as I mentioned to you, the opponent is Filmer. In the case of Hegel, the opponents are more both realist and rationalist. In the case of Marx, the major opponent is Hegel, though he's there. He learned a lot of things from him. So with whom you engage, Okay, I did not find anybody in India who is, I found in India people who are either doing Indian philosophy or people who are doing Western philosophy. So this is what so when I realized that the answer is depressing, I kept quiet. And then on a chance visit to Delhi, I happened to meet Professor Ashish Nandi. And then while discussing with him, a new idea came, which is formulated as follows. I said that Indians are not, both Indians in social sciences and literature are they borrowing from the West because of the, because of the colonialism, or are they borrowing from the West because we don't have? Are we borrowing intellectual, academically, what we already have, in India, or what that which we don't have in India. So that is the discussion that really gave a turning point. So I asked this in asking this question, I found another shocking thing. What is the shocking thing? That yes, the question is important. We are borrowing because we don't have the text. Okay, so what should we do? Should we keep on borrowing? Okay, borrow. But I also explored another alternative. The other alternative is the following. That is, I revisited the book's history of philosophy again. I found something very interesting there. And that what is interesting there is philosophy performed two kinds of jobs, both in the West and in India. What are those two kinds of jobs? Philosophers worked on philosophy that is ready-made. Philosophy that is ready-made. You know, you have Hegel's philosophy, your books by Hegel, and then you start discussing them. You write papers, you write books, you write criticism, you write your appreciation and all that. Okay, or Wittgenstein for that matter, or Karl Popper, or anybody else. But then it also did something in addition to this, and that is, it also made philosophy ready. So I make a distinction between ready-made and making ready. Okay, so that gave me a clue to read whatever is written in India, by Indians, India by Indians. And it is in this context I found out something very, very interesting. I came across the writings of B.K. Matilal, J.N. Mohanty, and Dayakrishna. And I realized very quickly after reading them thoroughly that these are the people who are neither doing only Western philosophy nor only Indian philosophy. So I found then that it is very important for me to make you to pursue this line of thought. But then soon I was disappointed because another idea came to me saying that all of them have committed what I call as a temporal imbalance, which means their Matilal compares Navya Nyaya, classical Indian Navya Nyaya, with analytical philosophy, modern logic. Okay, so now you find what is underlying the temporality that is underlying there. It is a classical India with modern India. Similarly, with phenomenology and classical Indian philosophy in J.N. Mohanty. Most pronouncedly, if you look at the Samvasa project of Dayakrishna, you find modern logicians in Samvad with traditional Pandits. So then I soon realized that this temporal imbalance has an inbuilt result that the temporal imbalance will go in favor of people who are modern because their idiom is updated, their arguments are sharp, whereas traditional arguments are not as duplicated, as made as sharp as the modern arguments are. So I turned away from these people and then embarked on finding out how to make philosophy ready in modern India, how to make philosophy modern in India. So it is in this context I came across works like. So I did not find, first I thought that one way of exploring this is not just to enumerate theories, but to find out whether there are any debates. So debate was the fulcrum of this entire project. So I was looking at debates. So there was no direct debates, but I created debates. There is no direct debate between Vivekananda and Mahatma Gandhi. Okay, but I created a debate, bringing views from both sides. There is no debate between Savarkar and Gandhi. I created a debate between them because Savarkar says politicize religion and Gandhi says spiritualize politics. So that's the debate between them. And then there is no debate between Aurobindo and K.C. Bhattacharya. I created these two, this. And these chapters were written, except the last chapter, while in Goa. While in Goa. So there are, please remember that all these people that I mentioned are not philosophers. But I introduced a distinction that you can explore the possibilities of making, like for instance, Buddha was not a philosopher. Christ was not a philosopher. They were made philosophers by later people. It is Nagarjuna, Dinnaga, Dharmakeerti who bring a philosophical frames to Buddhism. Okay, Christ was not a philosopher. It is Saint Augustine and Saint Aquinas who brought a philosophical, frame to the theological Christian theology. Similarly, you find many people like that. Okay, Advaita was not, Vedanta was not a very philosophical doctrine. If you look at it, actually, if you read Vedanta Sutras and Advaita Vedanta, you find a marked difference. Okay, in the Vedanta Sutras, you will only find compilations. In Upanishads, you find only explorations. Okay, it is Shankara who converted these ideas and took a lot of things from Buddhism and made them as philosophical doctrines. So that's the reason why I thought that one could do something like this. Take learning lessons. Please remember, because I'm obsessed with one idea, that I never wanted to relapse into regionalism or provincialism. That's why I always tagged on to Western philosophy, Indian philosophy, classical Indian philosophy, the classical Western and things like that. So when I was doing in all these things, the only person who was philosopher par excellence was K.C. Bhattacharya. That's fine, but I brought that into the thing. So that is one way of making philosophy ready in India, in a debate. And then I also took one decision that I don't want to sell Indian philosophy at a local level. I must reach them, hoist them at a global level. That's another decision that I took. Okay, and then, as I mentioned to you earlier, I thought that there is a possibility of creating another, the bolstering an idea of debating, Gandhi, debating Vivekananda. These are the two things that I took. In the debating things, there are two more things that I have not covered. One is the debate between Gandhi and Tagore and Gandhi and Tilak. That's a different matter. I'll come to it in a moment. In compiling these anthologies, like debating Gandhi, debating Vivekananda, and these anthologies, I am inspired by Badarayana, who is the first compiler the world has produced. He is a compiler par excellence. If you read Vedanta Sutras, I was not so much interested in the content of Vedanta Sutras, but the compilation technique adopted by Badarayana in Vedanta Sutras. So that is one part. One part is to explore whether there are debates, and if there are debates, and I found some of them having a temporal imbalance. So then I found that here let me also point out to you, there's something very interesting that has happened. No philosopher from India, except marginally here and there, wrote on their predecessors, except Ramchandra Gandhi in a book which I edited called Seven Sages. He wrote on seven sages: Krishnamurti, Ravindo, Vivekananda, Ramakrishna, Raman Maharshi, and so on, so forth, Aravindo, and so on, so forth. So this is the gap. So what was happening to these guys? So they were working on ready-made texts in the West, ready-made text in India. Okay, I was not interested in only pursuing that ready-made text in India. I wanted to explore making philosophy ready. Making philosophy ready. So it is this that made me to compile these texts and also create debates there. Then, so there are so many gaps. There's so many gaps, in philosophy in India. So this is how I started, exploring whether some gaps can be filled or not. So then I found out that while philosophy is not doing that well in India, there are a lot of work being done on very important Indian ideas by Indian social scientists. So I tried to review the works of them, particularly how, for instance, the philosophers the social scientists in India have failed to really grasp the important essence of modernity in their writings. So I have a book called Modernity in Indian Social Theory, where I try to show why they just mute that sound. Hello. Yeah. So that I thought that philosophy cannot work in isolation. It's doing philosophy not work in isolation, not in the area, in the time in which you are in, where you are not doing well. And then I realized that when I was reading the works of social scientists in India on secularism, nationalism, all various topics and things like that, my colleagues in the department who never found what I was doing seriously, who they thought that I'm wasting my time, not doing philosophy, hardcore philosophy as they called. I kept quiet because I thought, I'm a mad fellow. I pursue, what interests me, and I pursue it passionately and seriously. Okay, so when I was reading these things, so they used to reprimand me saying that, why are you wasting your time? I said, no, I'm investing my time. I'm not. You think it's a waste? It is an investment. I did not tell them. I told myself that it is an investment. And then one support for my thinking that it is investment is, see, I read the 30 volumes of Kant in IIT Kanpur, and only 4 or 5 are discussed by philosophy. What are the other volumes about? He's a philosopher, but he wrote 3 critiques and then, one work or the other, which is philosophically interesting. What was he doing in others? He's writing on enlightenment, which Foucault later critiques. He's writing on beauty. He's writing on sublime. He's writing on pleasure. Okay? And in fact, a lot of these writings are taken seriously, archived by the feminists, and then they blasted him. So I thought that yes, philosophy you should do, but that doesn't mean that you don't react to what is going on around you. You don't, take the developments in science seriously, the developments in social science seriously, and more importantly, the developments in literature seriously. All these things are very, very, taking them seriously is what I thought is part of doing philosophy. So Kant came to me very handy because, in these numerous volumes that is published posthumously later, there are only, not even, there's only 10% which philosophers call as philosophy, but others are not even, they are not even visited. Okay, they go on, teaching critique. And that's the kind of a thing. So it is in this context I found that that uh, exploring these ideas are interesting. And then I made a very thorough critical assessment of the philosophers who are writing, like Akhil Bilgramin, K. Sachidanandamurti, then K.C. Bhattacharya, Matilal, and those people. And I found the same problem. Same problem is that they have not asked the questions that I was interested in asking. And that is the reason why their work is not progressing as much as I would have expected them to progress. So that's the point. So this is what I tried in this modern frames and pre-modern themes, and then came this ambitious idea. The ambitious idea is that it is, if there is a Western philosopher, should Western philosophers be useful only in the West? Okay, so please remember, sorry, I said, look, I borrowed Western frames, modern Western frames, and brought pre-modern Indian themes for discussion. For instance, I discussed Rousseau on old age, and then tried to show how important these are for India. And then I wanted to use the Western philosophers, use them in India. Okay, in India, because you have to replenish Indian philosophy, modern Indian philosophy, with several aspects. So there I found out that people like Rousseau, I've tried to, this is the formula that I used, is bending Western philosophers for India without breaking them. Bending Western philosophers without breaking them. So I tried to bring Deleuze and Guattari, Rousseau, Bergson, and then Bergson and Derrida. So let me tell you what I did with Derrida. What I did with Derrida is I took his first famous essay, not so much the of grammatology, because I can't really make any addition to of grammatology scholarship. There are so many people, writing, reading that, and one gets completely exhausted, while reading a book, not to speak of writing anything, adding anything to that scholarship. So I was very pragmatic. I said, no, I took some of the essays which I can manage. And then noted that what is Derrida saying? Derrida is saying that starting from Plato, please remember, in of grammatology, he makes some very, very subtle points while quoting Nietzsche. He says, Socrates who never wrote. Socrates who never wrote. And who wrote for Socrates? It is Plato who wrote. And what is his idea of a logocentrism? Logocentrism is with reference to something that is put in written language, not in spoken language. If you look at all the writings of Derrida, you don't find him attributing logocentrism to spoken discussions. Logocentrism is related to texts and written text. That's why I found that statement, Socrates who never wrote. Socrates who never wrote. And then subsequent to the Socrates who never wrote, you have Plato who only wrote. And then you find Nietzsche who is combating, saying that if God is dead, there is grammar. If God is dead, there is grammar. So from all these discussions, I found out that there is something which is very, very interesting in the silences of Derrida, and ask the question, if there is a text in the West, there is a Bible, okay, or there is a Plato's or these things, and then people think that all the ideas are there and readers are only passively reading. So he's contest this position, saying that no, there is a deconstruction of the text and restores dynamism, activity, and identity to the reader. That's broad formula. So, for instance, there is a text, and the interpretations become subservient. A reader will become subservient, and then text is overriding. So that is the format. So I use this thing to show how, for instance, in India, you have Vedanta Sutras composed by, not written by, but composed by Badarayana. And now all the acharyas, Shankaracharya, Ramanujacharya, Madhvacharya, and Vallabhacharya, Nimbarkacharya, they all write interpretations differing from each other, amongst each other, on the same text. And now, who is well known in India? Badarayana or Acharyas? Acharyas who are interpreters are well known, or Badarayana who is a composer is well known? I found that there is a reversal in India. In India, it is a reader, interpreter who is more popular, more popular than the original writer. So this contrast, I used Derrida to show this contrast. He said that from this, I'm not saying don't read Derrida, but don't read Derrida as if you wanted to be ignorant about the contextual variations, okay, and then blindly follow him, as is the case in cultural studies and various other schools of knowledge in India. So that's where I did that, and then I also found out that there is a need to find out whether there are any new texts, and then I found this new text called Desire and Liberation by Vadra Chandidas. So in fact, I wrote a book on that, on that manuscript, on the book, a title Enduring Colonialism: Classical Presences and Modern Absences in India, and the book became very, very famous. It ran into several, paperback reprints, and then Oxford University Press wanted to know, wanted to publish the original. So I said, I will be editor only if you allow me to include all the English writings about Chandidas, and then they published it as Desire and Liberation, the biography of a text. That's what has happened. I'll just, can I take 10 minutes more, or should I stop here? Hello? Can I take 10 minutes more or stop here?
So you can continue for another 10 minutes.
So now, so this work that I have done before I left University of Hyderabad. Now I am into something else, and that something else is the following: that like there was no philosophical text except this text that I'm highlighting in Indian contemporary modern Indian philosophy. I also found something which is a big gap. Is that is Indian national movement, which is one of the major movements of 19th and 20th century, is theorized by historians, it's there in literature, by political scientists and others. There is not a single work on Indian national movement by philosophers, either India or not. If you look at the West, the modern West, the foundations for is all about nationalism. The foundations for nationalisms are laid by Descartes in talking about individual centeredness, and then collectivity, contract, nation, and things like that. There are numerous works, and the recent one being, recent means some for 40 years back, Nation and Nationalism by Ernest Gulner. And in Therapy of Desire, Martha Nussbaum makes one very interesting point in a footnote. She says that no Western philosopher except Stoics in the classical time and later Charles Taylor leaves discussion about nationalism. They all presuppose, except these two, three, they all presuppose nation as an overarching in their analysis, which is true. I read again, Jane Stuart Mill, Popper, all other people, all the radicals. I found that they are all working. The discussion is premised on on this thing about inside the nation, not outside. But if that is the major aspect of discussion in India, why is it that philosophers in India have not theorized nationalism? They may not have, I'm exploring whether they did not theorize it because it is not worth theorizing, or their reason for not theorizing is very, very intriguing and needs to be explored more carefully. So this is the work that I am now doing. I find that this opens a new vista into it. And one thing which I just say it without arguing more about it is, I find, for instance, Balagangadhar Tilak writes Gita Rahasya, and it is a text which is full of scholarship, full of scholarship. You don't find the discussion of it, of reference to it, even in those books about contemporary Indian philosophy or modern Indian philosophy that includes Tilak. They only talk about his Swaraj. They don't talk about this book. But now I find, I'm just writing a chapter in this book, very, very challenging ideas, that really puts an answer to the question about what is nationalism in India. And one important argument, and I'll stop there, in that book is that he says that all acharyas, Shankaracharya, Madhvacharya, Vallabhacharya, and Ramanujacharya, have only interpreted the text. And he calls that as extrapolation. And he says that they have misled the text in their interpretation. He comes up with this radical idea. That's why he doesn't call his book as his interpretation, his Bhashya. He makes a distinction between Bhashya and Rahasya. He says that theirs are Bhashya and they are misleading. Mine is not Bhashya, mine is Rahasya. What is it? He says that all these acharyas highlighted in their interpretation of Gita that Krishna is recommending Bhakti Marga, Mukti Marga. And this undermines Karma Yoga, the action. And he says that it is because of these acharyas' overemphasis on Mukti Marga and Bhakti Marga, Indians have neglected the physical and this worldly. And this is led to their weakness. Okay, it's a political agenda. Okay. On the contrary, he says, using Mimamsa, he says, what is there in the beginning of the text? In the beginning, you find Arjuna not reluctant to fight war. And Krishna comes and teaches him. And then at the end, what do you find? You find Arjuna ready to fight war. So, what is the message of Gita? He says the message of Gita is not Bhakti Marga, but Karma Marga of fighting a war, and justifies it. So, this is a very exciting kind of a thesis that he comes out. And and it's really scholarly, numerous references to Western philosophy, like Schopenhauer, Plato, Aristotle, Hegel, Marx. I mean, name anybody. And then very profound knowledge about Indian philosophy. So and then there is an engagement, which is with Gandhi. That where Gandhi, when Tilak says Gita promotes violence, Gandhi says exactly opposite. It promotes non-violence. But all these things are not claims; they are backed by textual evidences and supports. So that's where as I said, I think that doing Indian philosophy is very, very complex and challenging, but highly rewarding. Highly rewarding. Fertile, it's a fertile ground, unexplored. Competition is very less, and you can really. But you have to feel. You have to be courageous. You have to feel. You have to suffer some loneliness, which I did, but it is very rewarding. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for your lucid and effortless talk and for sharing your philosophical journey. I now invite Akash to moderate the Q&A session. Akash, over to you. Akash, are you there?
I think Akash has got some network issue. So, Elizabeth, can you please continue with the
Yes.
Q&A session? Thank you.
Uh, yes. So I ask everyone to, I open the floor now for questioning. You can type in your questions on the chat box that is below the screen, and also you can raise your hand. You can. I will take the messages one by one.
We have a question in the chat box from Vasudha ma'am. I'll read out the question. I understand that there is a dichotomy between Indian philosophy and Western philosophy. But when is this dichotomy binary helpful, and when do we feel it hinders an understanding of a text?
Yeah, good question. If it is not helpful, if you let it pass, it is helpful if you calibrate them. Okay? And how do you calibrate them? What do you need to calibrate them? You have to, first thing is, you have to read Indian philosophy of that particular aspect or branch of Indian philosophy very carefully and take notes. Then you phenomenologically bracket it for a minute, and then read Western philosophy, which is the same, thing. And then you have to build a bridge to compare and contrast. Let me tell you this. I forgot to mention. I find there is a very important, contributor to comparative philosophy, predating philosophy East West, called Gaudapada. Okay, in Gaudapada you find a very important idea where Gaudapada is trying to calibrate or compare and contrast both Vedanta and Buddhism. You know that they are incompatible to each other. So Vedantin will not accept Buddhism and Buddhist will not accept Vedanta. Buddha clearly said that you should abandon all this, Veda ritualistic kind of a philosophy. But then Gaudapada embarks on so one thing is to say, okay, I either belong to Vedanta or I belong to Buddhism, which is where I find it is not scholarly challenging. What makes this difference scholarly challenging is, as I said, A, B, and then build a C which provides a bridge between A and not A. That is challenging, and the inspiration for that I derive from Gaudapada.
So there is another question in the chat box. I'll read out the question. What do you mean by making philosophy ready? What is to be ready for? What it is to be ready for?
I don't know what it is to be ready for, but I will tell you how to make philosophy ready. I said, look, if you look at if you carefully read Saint Augustine and Saint Aquinas, you find that they are the ones who identified very interesting philosophical ideas that are scattered in a pre-systematic way available in Christ, the Nazareth, Sermon on the Mount and all. And then they built a system. And today, whether you agree with it or not, it is a philosophical system. Thomism is a philosophical system. Now, Buddha did not write a philosophical doctrine. He only gave pravavachanas, okay, tales, parables, and things like that. Now, it did not stop there. Nargarjuna takes on this very arduous task, or philosophically presenting these ideas, profound ideas, but not systematically presented ideas, and presents them in a philosophical way. Now, I'm saying, if you look at Gandhi, if you look at Ambedkar, if you look at Tilak, you look at any of these people, please remember, when I say all these people, it is not to patronize them or recommend them, but critically look at them and find whether there are any philosophical ideas which can be extracted from them. And that is what I did in this, the debating Gandhi, or even debates in Indian philosophy and things like that. So the inspiration for this comes from these stalwarts, where, as I said, make a distinction between working with ready-made philosophy and making philosophy ready-made. Does it answer your question?
Yeah. Mr. Varuna Bhatta has raised his hand. Mr. Varun, sir, you can please unmute yourself and ask the question.
Am I audible, Raghu?
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, Raghu, fascinating talk. And also, I wanted to hear your talk about how to do contemporary philosophy. And I think it has given me some ideas and a lot of motivation, to be frank. Want your clarification on something. As when you were trying to point out that you were trying to fabricate, reshape, like Vivekananda as a philosopher or Savarkar as a philosopher, present them as philosophy in that sense, as philosophers. I think you're also doing something which I think is very important to notice, and I want your thoughts on that. And that is, see, most of the times as philosophers, how we become philosophers is that we do MA, we do PhD, and we are introduced to a lot of philosophical texts and quote unquote philosophical questions. This is a philosophical question, this is the way to answer it. And the way it has been given to us, like as you said, ready-made philosophy, is through certain traditions. There are already certain questions, like say question about whole and part, question about like say nationalism, political science, and all of those things are already bracketed, qualified as these are philosophical questions. Go, and there is no doubt that is not a philosophical question. And given that there is some traditional context of understanding them as philosophical questions, because someone has, like say Rousseau has made it a philosophical question or something like that, their philosophical questions are always contextualized in particular tradition. And that's why most of the time we confuse, students of philosophy confuse that doing philosophy means that it also already should be identified as a philosophical question in some tradition or the other. Otherwise, you're not asking a philosophical question. That is the burden, the pressure that somehow that has been built into the system. I don't know why is that the case. But I think what you're suggesting here is that if we have to do philosophy in the contemporary times, don't look for a question in the tradition which has already been given. Of course, look for ideas and resolutions and insights from there. But I think then the task is what you're suggesting is that go and ask a question, make it philosophical for yourself. Now, if this is, I think this is your larger project.
Yes.
And if this is the case, what have been your struggles of converting something into a philosophical question?
See, thank you. One struggle was that earlier people used to ask me, like even now they do, is Vivekananda a philosopher? Is Savarkar a philosopher? Is Ambedkar a philosopher? That question I have, converted into saying, okay, I don't want to ask that question. I also don't want to answer that question. The reason is philosophy did not ask this question. This is not the only question that philosophy asked, for which the answer is Hegel is a philosopher, Marx is a philosopher, Shankara is a philosopher. Philosophy also did the other job, because I find that answering that question relapses into closing. You have a prefixed definition about philosophy, and then whoever enters into it, they become inside. The people who are outside, they're outside. So it's a closure. I'm trying to embark on an opening. And where do I take inspiration, Varun? I take inspiration from philosophy itself. And then what we are using in our day-to-day philosophizing with our students is this ready-made philosophers. We don't tell them that there is an activity called, we don't tell them how Nargarjuna transformed pre-philosophy into philosophy. Now, that process we don't tell them. In the process, we just kill this interest, that can generate in that phase. So, what happens then? And in the process of it, allow them to enter into the closures, we are just completely making them completely disinterested in the subject. Instead, you equip them with that kind of a thing. Ask them to explore not what is philosophy, but what can become philosophy. That's where I make a distinction between philosophy ready-made and making philosophy ready. Because this is a profound question, because I draw this question from Derrida, who quotes Nietzsche, who asked, Socrates would never wrote. Okay, now you juxtapose it with Kierkegaard, who said that Plato is the first enemy of Socrates. And why? What is non-logocentric becomes logocentric. What is non-logocentric? A vibrant, lively debate which keeps on, polishing with each other and transmitted to generation, gets completely ossified, frozen. So that is the point that I find. And suppose if you open students into this area, not just here, that's how Western philosophy has blossomed. Tell them, what is not available to them and ask them to explore. Then you find it's exciting discipline to work, and your students will be very, very interested in exploring, what others cannot do.
Thank you, Raghu. I have a follow-up question, but I will join back in the queue. Yeah.
So there is a question in the chat
I'll
box.
wait to join back. Yeah.
So there is a question in the chat box by Mr. Lenin Joshua. I'll read out the question to you. Sir, you have mentioned P.K. Matilal to create a temporal imbalance with that of Navya Nyaya to that of modern Western thought, that is analytic philosophy. May I know that what Dayakrishna brought the imbalance to?
Dayakrishna, good that you asked it. Dayakrishna compares, he has this huge project called Samvad, where he makes modern logicians, who are well versed in Russell and other things, in debate with classical, pundits, traditional pundits. Come on, what is it going to happen? I mean, don't you feel that, there is a temporal imbalance? A traditional Pandit, though from India, his idiom is very, very, very archaic. It is not, as sharp. It is not informed by the contextual, dynamism and the temporal variance that modern logicians have. And then you want to compare them. They will lose, and they lost. And that's what Daya Krishna confesses, that Samvad project was not successful.
So there is another question by Miss Jaya G. Nair. She says, how do you place Dr. Ambedkar? Did he do philosophy in contemporary times?
Yes, two things. One is Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. There are a lot of ideas in him which are very, very philosophical. Now the debate is starting now. Many people are working, on Ambedkar thesis. I've evaluated, one thesis from IIT Bombay, which is very, very good work, and then several others. See, there are 2 points that attracted me in B.R. Ambedkar. One is that if you look at, in fact, I wrote it up. One thing that happens is that he claims Gita to be a Buddhist text and gives 12 evidences in favor of it. He says there is no karuna in Indian philosophy. Karuna is a Buddhist karuna. There is no complete surrender in Indian philosophy. You can disagree with him, but now you don't understand now. When Tilak says it is a Hindu text, when everybody says, I mean, there is a difference about whether Gita promotes violence or non-violence. That's a different matter. That is the philosophical debate. Did we discuss in our class that there is a person called Tilak who said that Gita promotes violence, and there is a person from a person called Gandhi who says, giving textual evidence that it is a doctrine that it is a text that promotes non-violence? Isn't it philosophically challenging? How much we deprived our own students from these challenges? Okay, so come back to this thing. So when everybody is claiming Gita to be a Hindu text, he says it is a Buddhist text. It is the job of philosophers who are trained both in Western philosophy and Indian philosophy to take debate with Ambedkar. And I think it's a very, 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 interesting debate with him. It also has a lot of political implications. That's one part of it. The other part is very interesting. That there is a lot of there's a lot of discussion about why it is converting into Buddhism and all that. I'm not interested in that discussion, but I'm interested in the discussion. There is a variance between two modern a philosopher from West, a philosopher from India. That is, Descartes simultaneously, it takes no time. He rejects tradition and immediately endorses modernity. It rejects tradition and immediately it is simultaneous. Whereas Ambedkar rejects Hinduism, takes 24 years and a few months to explore all options, including Buddhism, before he arrives at converting into Buddhism. Isn't it philosophically challenging? Isn't it a challenge about temporality that you teach in and out in philosophy? Time in Kant, time in, why don't you apply this beautiful, time in Bergson, time in Heidegger? And when with my training in Bergson, Heidegger, and Hegel and others, Schopenhauer, I use this, I find that there is something philosophically interesting variance between these two modern philosophers. So that's my answer. Yes, of course, there is a need to thoroughly read him. Not everything that he said may be philosophical. should not be, need not be. Why should it be? But before you set him aside, read him as, as seriously as you read philosophy that is reading right.
So Mr. Jinesh has raised his hand. Mr. Jinesh, you can unmute yourself and ask the question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, sir, for this very interesting talk. My question is somewhere similar to what was asked by Varun as well. What exactly goes into creating a Purva Paksha where it is not evident? So, for instance, like Aristotle had Plato, and many other instances are there throughout the history, but how would you uh, suggest that, for instance, Gandhi and Savarkar? I mean, you mentioned that there was no such debate between them, but it could be created as one. So, what's the um, ground for creating a Purva Paksha where it is not evident? Even, for instance, like for Nagarjuna, what could be a Purva Paksha for Nagarjuna if that is how one would like to situate him in a debate or, yeah.
Thank you. The Purva Paksha for Nagarjuna is Vedanta.
Oh,
Very clearly Vedanta. But when it comes to, so at least, there is a clarity about them. But as I said, that I approach the same thing, Purva Paksha, not in isolation, but in conjunction with the distinction that I made between philosophy ready-made, making philosophy ready. When you come to the modern philosophers. See, for instance, so much, if you look at the literature on Vivekananda and Gandhi, everybody says that Sudhir Kakar, Ashish Nandi, D.L. Seth, and P.S. Sain, everybody's talked about continuity between them. Okay, and you have evidence to show that there is continuity because Gandhi praises Swami Vivekananda. But I found as a student of philosophy profound differences. And what is the difference? The difference is that Vivekananda says that there is poverty in India. Is there poverty in India? There is poverty in India during his time. And he says we should use Western science and technology and their industry to remove this poverty. Is this the position which Vivekananda has taken? He says that Western modernity should be used to eradicate poverty in India. Is that a position? Now Gandhi opposes this. You know why he opposes it? He says the poverty in India is created by Western modernity. By, with their mill products, they have completely made the livelihood of the handicrafts and, village industry. So now you find the difference between them. Can you bring them together for a debate and tell your students, now read these two people and come back to me, who is right? Is it possible? Similarly, now Gandhi says, Savarkar says, politicize religion. Politicize religion. Okay? And many people, Akhil Bilgrami, T.N. Madan, all of them say that there is no difference between, not T.N. Madan, Akhil Bilgrami. His EPW article says that there is no difference between Savarkar and Gandhi. Okay? Because both of them are talking about Hindu symbols. But I find this difference. What did I find? Savarkar says politicize religion. Gandhi is saying spiritualize politics. Understand now? Is there a debate possible there? Can you tell your student, just now go and read these writers and come back to me. What do you think? What is your impression? Similarly with, say, for instance, Aurobindo says that there should be a continuity between matter and spirit. K.C. Bhattacharya in his book, in his article, Concept of Philosophy, says that matter, by its definition, rejects spirit. You understand now? These are the things. And there are actual debates which I did not, which is debate between Tagore and Gandhi and Tilak. I hope it answers your question.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
So, Varun, you can continue with your follow-up question, sir.
Thank you, Akash. Raghu, if you don't mind, I have a follow-up question.
Please, please.
It relates to the previous question that I asked. And see, the thing is, I completely agree, and I'm on board with the idea that, like, say, we have to make new questions philosophical, contemporary questions philosophical. The flip side of it, which I'm currently facing, and I'm still thinking through it, I have no clarity on how to proceed further about it, is that this kind of a project is doubly challenging in a place like India, where the professional identity of a philosopher is always weak. And what do I mean by it is that, like, say, I mean, in India, given its academic bad state of philosophy, academic philosophy, or however you want to put it, there is no clarity of who is a philosopher. Now, with that professional kind of an identity crisis of a professional philosopher, now who is doing what can be called as philosophy becomes a very broad question, very contentious question. Now, we all know good philosophy is happening in literature department as well, English department as well, art and aesthetics department as well. I completely acknowledge that, and I have no problem with that. But the problem is that, like, given this vagueness and identity crisis that the philosophers in India face, whoever can be called as philosophers in India face, now converting something into a philosophical question has a kind of a regressive mode that now only these things can be called philosophy. So it looks like we can't escape that problem. On one side, we have to make certain questions, contemporary questions, philosophical, but on the other side, we also have to hold on to this some notion of a professional identity of a philosopher, or whatever it may be, that, okay, this is philosophy, but this is social science, this is literature, or something like that. How do you navigate this kind of contentious questions?
See, one thing that I do here is I think academics give you freedom, in the sense that, they're permanent jobs. So nobody can, undermine me on those things. So I can experiment. So in my own case, when I was doing all these things, as I said in the presentation, many people said this is not philosophy. I said, fine. I was never taking issues with them, because the point that you made, that if they are in a crisis, is the crisis a sign of weakness or strength? It's a weakness. People who are in a crisis and are weak in India have become arrogant. People who are in a crisis, weak, have become very arrogant in setting the definition. And if you collect the definition each one is setting, see, when I did this, you helped me in this project, UGC project, I'm asking them, what is philosophy? There is no overlap. So why should I take them seriously? So that's why, I have great respect for my teachers. I disagreed. I followed them seriously, very seriously. But when I found that they are weak, I left them. I explored new, I raised new questions, suffered, because, see, you don't get into these groups and, you always this thing going on. As a researcher, my job is not to get into groups. My job is how to reach my adversary. So when the enduring colonialism first draft was ready, I gave it to a friend, Raghuramaraju, to read, and he said, this book makes sense to philosophy people. I spent 1 year to revise it so that, it makes sense to non-philosophy people too. And out of 8 people who reviewed, 6 of them happened to be non-philosophers. So you have to do this. I mean, what is it? Okay, I will fail. What if I fail? I will not get one promotion. Fine. But so
Yeah.
feeling. I was and see, there are some cases where they said you are not doing philosophy. I said, if philosophy is doing well, and if I claim that that I want to be philosophers, then it is fine. You yourself are not doing well. So why are you saying that you are not philosophers? So in one case also, somebody used this argument from Russell's on descriptions, saying that if somebody says that Raghu is not doing philosophy, it makes sense only if he said that he wants to do philosophy. He is a philosopher. I don't claim. It is like the present king of France is bald. So I'm not saying it out of arrogance. I'm saying that because I am in my spree, but in the process, I wanted to launch this product at a global level. There are no compromises made.
Correct.
So that I don't want to relapse into provincials.
No, that is true. I was just trying to point out that, like, say, in the West, where like the identity of philosophy or philosopher is much more stable. I'm not saying it's not fluid. It's fluid, but it's much more stable. It's just that, like, say, they have a stable ground to ask new questions. Unlike in the India, where there is an identity crisis, we don't have a good journal, and all of those kind of problems. Then the problem is that everyone in India is a philosopher. Right? So I don't know. I mean, that plurality, should I celebrate, or it sometimes becomes a problem, sometimes becomes a good thing. So yeah.
The entire that route is, I find it unproductive for me. What I find for me and for my students, lot of opportunities by doing philosophy. See, I have 160 students in my class on Indian national movement. Okay, I'm able to, I'm able to, grasp, draw their attention. They're all engineering students. So I find, that one needs to use this opportunity to explore. You may not get to where you want to get, but it's worth it.
Thank you, Raghu. Yeah.
So we'll take one final question. It is from Miss Aditi Singh. She asks, it is there in the chat box. I'll read out. She asks, Sir, do you think we need new methodologies or tools in the field of philosophy to incorporate contemporary gaps in current ongoing research?
Yes, you need new methods, not just one method, different methods. The method that I followed is the debate. So the method that I followed is debate. I'm interested in exploring people who differ. A debate, the prerequisite for debate is difference. Okay, and so it is in this context. I'm trying to. The debate is one aspect of my method, and making philosophy ready is another aspect of my method. And then learning a lot of things from the rigor from Western philosophy is my method. And using and reading Indian context, particularly modern context, which is unexplored, is part of my method. So this is the cluster of things that form my methodology. But I'm not saying that this is the only method that is available, because you can go on explore other method or follow. But before you do that, I request you to read carefully the existing works in modern contemporary Indian philosophy. Carefully, very carefully. Then only, you can go ahead, not without reading them. You have to read Matilal carefully, read Jain Mahanti carefully, read Jaya Krishna carefully, and then find that none of these people have discussed the Vivekananda, their predecessors. No academic philosopher except Ramchandra Gandhi talked about these people.
Thank you very much, sir, for answering everyone's question to their satisfaction. But if anyone has any more questions, the email will be shared. The email of sir will be shared in the chat box. You can continue the discussions further and ask if there are any more doubts. I hand over back to Elizabeth. Ma'am, please continue with the program further.
Thank you, Akash. Now I request Sagar to propose the vote of thanks.
Uh, Thank you, Elizabeth. Can you hear me?
Yes, Sagar, you're audible.
Yeah, so I would like to thank Raghuram sir for this insightful talk. Thank you so much, sir, for this interesting talk. I would also like to express my gratitude to Dr. Koshi Tharakan, Dean of School of Sanskrit Philosophy and Indic Studies, and all the faculty members of the school. I am extremely grateful to all the research scholars at Goa University for their contribution to the success of this event. And lastly, I also thank everyone who attended the talk, both inside and outside the Goa University. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for
Thank
this
you.
opportunity. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Sagar. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Before ending the session, I would like to inform everyone that the recording of the lecture will be posted on our YouTube channel, Philosophy at Goa University. Thank you, everyone, for attending. We will be back soon with another online guest lecture. Thank you.
Thank you and bye.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you,
sir.
sir.
Thank
And
you.
sorry for the internet difficulties in
No, no,
between.
no, thank you.